All stories on this channel are original content, fully protected by copyright and intellectual property laws. Any unauthorized copying, re-uploading, narration, or use of these stories will be considered copyright infringement and may lead to serious legal consequences. These stories are exclusively owned by this channel. Respect the rights or face legal action. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Emily R., and I wanted to share it on the channel. I was at home one night, planning to pull an all-nighter to catch up on some work papers I desperately needed to finish. I'd procrastinated too long, and with a few other things that had come up, I really had no choice but to stay up and get it done. I brewed a cup of coffee, went upstairs to my office, and shut the door to block out distractions so I could power through the night. For the first few hours, I did surprisingly well. I was sipping my coffee and staying focused. But as the cup emptied, so did my energy. I decided to take a short break, stretch my legs, and head downstairs for another cup. As the coffee brewed, I noticed something strange. The air downstairs felt noticeably colder than the rest of the house, like a faint, chilly breeze was moving through the room. I checked the thermostat, but the heat was still on, just several degrees lower than it should have been. That didn't make sense. I walked into the living room and froze. One of the back windows was wide open. Now, I do open my windows during the day sometimes, but I never forget to close them. And this one wasn't cracked. It was open all the way. My stomach sank as I slowly approached. The idea that someone might have opened it and climbed inside crept into my mind. But when I looked closer, I didn't see any footprints in the dirt outside or any smudges on the window frame that would suggest someone had climbed through. I told myself I must have accidentally left it open earlier and just didn't remember. Trying to shake off the unease, I shut the window tightly, grabbed my fresh coffee, and went back upstairs. About 30 minutes later, I still couldn't stop thinking about it. The thought kept gnawing at me. So I got up again and did a quick sweep of the house, just to be sure I was alone. I found nothing out of place, so I went back to my desk and tried to focus. Another hour passed. My eyes were heavy and I was mentally drained when a loud thump echoed behind me. I jolted upright. The sound came from just behind my desk, sharp and heavy, like something had fallen. I turned around, but nothing was there. My bedroom was on the other side of that wall, so I figured maybe the sound came from in there. Still, after what happened with the window, I couldn't ignore it. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, and opened the bedroom door. The room looked completely normal. Nothing had fallen, nothing was out of place. It didn't make sense. The sound had been too loud to just be my imagination. Feeling uneasy, I went back to my office, but I couldn't shake it. For the next 15 minutes, I sat there trying to focus, but my eyes kept darting to the wall behind me. Finally, I spun around in my chair, staring at the spot where the sound came from. That's when I realized something. There was a small closet built into that wall, one I hadn't thought about in months. I barely used it except to store some old jackets and clothes. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I stood up, walked over, and slid the closet door open. My breath caught in my throat. A man was standing inside. He was inches away, hidden behind the coats, so close that if not for that thin layer of fabric, he could have grabbed me. His eyes were wide and lifeless. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he lunged. The entire closet shook as he shoved through the hanging clothes and charged toward me. I stumbled backward, my heart exploding with terror. As I ran, I heard him shout my name, in a voice I didn't recognize. The sound of my name coming from a stranger's mouth sent a shock through me. His tone was gravelly, almost deliberate, like he wanted me to know he knew me. I bolted out the front door and sprinted barefoot down the street to a neighbor's house. I pounded on their door until they opened and called the police. When officers arrived, the man was gone. There were no signs of where he'd gone or how he'd escaped. Nothing was taken, but the open window told the story. He must have climbed in while I was upstairs working, hiding in the closet the entire time. That meant he'd been there for an hour, watching me, listening to me, waiting. And the worst part? He knew my name. The police never identified him, and I still don't know who he was. But I know this: if I hadn't pulled that all-nighter and stayed awake, I might not be here to tell this story. Thank you to Emily R. for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in and it might be featured next. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Daniel H., and I wanted to share it on the channel. This happened to me almost 8 years ago, and I've never stopped thinking about it. I was in my early 20s at the time, camping deep in the wilderness of Upper Idaho. I wouldn't call myself an expert camper back then, but I went out often enough to know the basics. The area was home to a lot of wildlife, including black bears and grizzlies, so being prepared was crucial, which kept most casual hikers and campers away. Not many people lived out there, and it was rare to see anyone besides the occasional tourist hiking a nearby trail. Most campsites in Upper Idaho aren't crowded, and I preferred it that way. For this trip, I avoided the popular tourist spots and chose a lesser-known trail just outside a large mountain range. It wasn't well known, and the path wound through thick forest and along the foothills, before opening up to a beautiful clearing with a perfect view of the mountains. The nearest trail, about 3 miles away, led to a small lake that might have had a few campers, but I decided to skip it. My hike was quiet, eerily quiet. I didn't see another soul the entire way. When I arrived at the clearing, it was completely empty. I set up my tent on the far side of the area and built a small fire pit with some large stones. With a couple of hours of daylight left, I decided to just relax for the evening. I built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and watched the stars emerge as night settled in. The valley was silent, except for the soft whisper of the breeze and the occasional distant animal call. Then I heard something. The steady crunch of leaves somewhere out in the woods. After a moment, I realized it wasn't an animal. The steps were too deliberate. It sounded like a person walking. I froze, staring into the darkness until someone appeared at the edge of my campsite. It was a man. The campfire's flickering light made it hard to see his face clearly, but I could tell he had a large camping backpack. He stood there silently, looking at me and then around the campsite. Before I could say anything, he whispered, "Sorry," then turned around and walked back the way he'd come. The way he said sorry was strange, quiet, almost like he didn't want anyone else to hear it. I sat there, confused and uneasy. What was he sorry for? Maybe he was just looking for another campsite, but why was he walking around the woods at night without a flashlight? It felt off, but after a while I tried to shake it off and went back to stargazing. A few hours passed. The clouds rolled in, covering the moon and stars, and the forest grew darker. I wasn't tired yet, so I sat near the dying campfire, lost in thought. Then I heard footsteps again, faster this time, like someone running. The sound came from the same direction as before. My heart started pounding as I stood up. Within seconds, the man from earlier stumbled into the firelight. His backpack and clothes were dirty and torn, his hair greasy and matted, and his face streaked with grime. He looked terrified, yet his expression was blank, his mouth emotionless. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "You probably should have made it to your campsite by now. It's pretty late." He stood there, catching his breath, eyes darting around, especially towards something behind me. "Are you lost? Maybe I can help," I offered. He muttered no, almost under his breath. His voice trembled as he added that he was just hiking and didn't mean to bother me. But his eyes, they kept shifting to the right of me, like he was watching something I couldn't see. "Listen," I said, "you look nervous. I can help, maybe send a radio message for you or something." He didn't answer. Instead, his stare locked onto me. "You're camping here right now. Why?"
The question sent a chill down my spine. His tone was unnerving, his eyes flicking toward my right again. I turned to look over my shoulder. Nothing, but dark, empty woods. Then he asked, "Is it just you here? Are you alone? Where are the others?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Before I could say anything, he suddenly asked, "Have you been following me?" I shook my head. "No, I don't even know what you're talking about." But he wasn't looking at me anymore. His eyes had shifted over my shoulder again, and this time, they didn't come back. His face went pale, his eyes wide with terror. Then he whispered, "Then why are you with her?" I spun around instantly, but there was nothing, just the silent, empty forest. When I turned back, the man's face twisted in fear before he bolted into the woods, running deeper into the darkness. Within seconds, he vanished completely. I stood frozen, staring into the trees, trying to process what just happened. My heart was racing. What did he mean? Who was her? I kept glancing behind me, half expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing. At that point, I'd had enough. I packed up my gear as quickly as I could and started hiking back to my car. Every sound made me jump. I was certain I'd see something or someone following me, but I never did. When I reached my car, I drove straight home. The next morning, I filed a report at the nearest police station explaining that I'd encountered a distressed man out in the woods who might have been lost. They said they'd look into it, but as far as I know, he was never found. Over the years, I've come up with a theory. Maybe he'd been lost out there for days, dehydrated, starving, and delirious. Maybe he'd grown paranoid, thinking someone was following him. When he saw me, he might have been too far gone to realize I could help him. But sometimes, I wonder if he really did see someone behind me. Someone I couldn't see. The man was never found. Thank you to Daniel H. for sending in this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in and it might be featured next.
This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Rachel S., and I wanted to share it on the channel. This happened only a month ago. It was a weekend, and while I usually prefer to stay home and relax, this Saturday was different. One of my closest friends was celebrating her birthday, so I felt like I had to go. It wasn't meant to be a big party, just our small group of friends, a few drinks, and good conversation for a few hours. I lived in an apartment about a 10-minute drive from my friend's house. Around 6:30, I drove over. The night was simple and calm, more of a get-together than a party. We talked, laughed, and had a few drinks. Before I knew it, it was around 1 a.m. Most people had either left or decided to crash there for the night. I've never liked sleeping anywhere but my own bed, but I'd had enough to drink that I didn't want to risk driving. Against my better judgment, I decided to walk home. It wasn't far, maybe 25 to 30 minutes, through quiet suburban streets. I'd done the walk plenty of times before. My friends agreed it was fine to leave my car parked in their driveway, so I said goodbye and set off on foot. The night was calm, the air was still, and the neighborhood was silent. No passing cars, no people outside, not even lights in the windows. Everyone was already asleep. About 10 minutes into my walk, a pair of headlights appeared down the road. The car moved slowly and then rolled to a stop beside me. His window cracked just enough for me to hear him. It was too dark to see his face clearly. "Hey, are you okay? Need a ride anywhere?" he asked. His voice sounded calm, polite, even genuine. I smiled, waved him off, and said I was fine. He nodded and drove away. I thought nothing of it. A few minutes later, I noticed a glow behind me, the reflection of headlights bouncing off a street sign. I turned around. The same car was back, coming from the opposite direction this time. My stomach tightened. Instead of passing by, he pulled off to the side of the road and parked. The engine stayed on. I kept walking, pretending not to notice. I checked behind me a few times. He never got out. Eventually, he was out of sight, and I started to relax again. About 10 minutes from home, I turned down another street and froze. A car was parked in the middle of the road, up ahead. Not on the curb, not on the shoulder, directly in the center, with its headlights on. As I got closer, my heart dropped. It was the same car. The odds of that being a coincidence were almost zero. I slowed my pace. From where I stood, there were only two ways to get home: continue straight down this road or take the park trail that cut through the woods to the next block. Normally, I avoided the park at night. The path was unlit and eerie, but at that moment, walking past the car seemed like the greater risk. I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The car was parked just a little ahead of the trail entrance, like it had stopped there intentionally. If I took the path, I'd be walking right past it. If this guy really was waiting for me, I'd be heading straight into a trap. I stared into the trees, feeling that instinctive chill that something wasn't right. My gut screamed at me not to go into the woods. So I stayed on the road and walked right past the car. I held my breath as I passed, my footsteps quick and shaky. Nothing happened, but when I got in front of the car, I glanced through the windshield and froze again. The car was empty. The headlights were on, the engine idling, but the driver's seat was vacant. That's when I looked toward the tree line. Just beyond the glow of the headlights, a dark figure stood behind the trees, watching me. I didn't wait another second. I took off running. Behind me, I heard the car door slam, followed by the engine revving. I yanked my phone from my pocket as I ran, ready to call the police. Maybe seeing that scared him off, because instead of chasing me, the car screeched around, made a U-turn, and sped off in the opposite direction. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock the door. I called the police and reported everything: the car, the voice, the man standing by the woods. They said they'd keep an eye out, but with only a description of his vehicle and voice, there wasn't much they could do. It still haunts me to think how close I might have come to disappearing that night. If I hadn't trusted my instincts and had taken that trail, I would have walked straight into his trap, alone, in the dark, where no one could hear me scream. Thank you to Rachel S. for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in and it might be featured next.